Morning, everybody. Buenos dias. How's everybody feeling today? Doing okay? Good. Thank you all so much for coming out this morning. It's really great to see so many amazing faces today. Even though it's very gloomy outside, it's very bright in here, right? So yes, thank you all for coming out. I wanted to share just a little bit. I want to be able to jump in with our panelists, give them as much time as possible, and then give you all as much time as possible as well to share. So I wanted to very quickly just go over the agenda just so we're all aware of what's happening today. So we'll start off with our panelists. They will share a little bit of their experience working and fighting in CBAs. Then we'll have an opportunity to do a Q&A, so you all will be able to ask questions of the panelists. And then from there, we'll be able to do small group breakouts so that you all will be able to share with each other. It's a very simple but very powerful and impactful agenda. So yeah, let's get right to it. So as part of the Grossroots Collaborative, I just wanted to share a little bit before we do jump in of why I'm here and why CBAs sort of came up as something important, and it really has to do with the moment that we are in. Alejandra mentioned Trump, right, as being a moment, and it is. But we've been dealing with similar moments of what we have now for a very long time. Rahm Emanuel moments and Kappelman moments and Solis moments, right, and Joe Moore. I mean, there are so many, right? And for such a long time, we've been fighting neoliberalism for such a long time, and in many different ways. And one of the new ways that we've actually been able to fight, a new tool that we have, it's not a new tool, but another tool that's sort of been coming up a lot, are CBAs. And so this is something that's very powerful, and it's making an impact in a lot of different communities. Communities are using it very differently. I've actually was on a call with another group from a different city, and they use project labor agreements, actually, that's what they're called. And so it's very similar, right? When they heard us talk about, they heard me talk about CBA, so like, what is that? That sounds like this is something that we're working on. Can we learn more about it? What is it we want to use it? So it's sort of like gaining a lot of momentum and a lot of notoriety, or it's become a very good, powerful tool. Now, there's also something else that's happening now that's made this reason why you keep hearing about CBAs in Chicago is because not only of the fights, right? There's a lot of amazing campaigns happening across the city that are pushing developers and are pushing elected officials to sign CBAs or to create CBAs with the community. But there's something else. There's a reason why our streets are getting fixed now, right? There's a reason why there's a lot of ribbon cuttings. Who knows what that reason is? Elections, that's right. Yeah, so this is also another moment, right? This is also another tool that we are able to use. It's something that we can leverage, and I think we'll be able to talk a little bit about that. But there's just so much happening as to why we keep hearing about CBAs. Both here in Chicago, it's been very powerful, and also, like I said, across the country. We were working with another panelist to come today. She could not make it because she was busy winning the primary in Michigan to be the first Muslim congresswoman in the country, right? So that's great, that's amazing. That's something that she was working on, was a CBA. She worked on the CBA in Detroit, and so she's actually now being able to take that experience, to take that responsibility and the priorities, right, to Congress. So that's very exciting. I'm very excited to hear from our panelists. I will now stop talking, and I will hand it over to, start from the experts on our panel. I'll hand it over to the other expert to talk a little bit more about it. Thanks. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Alex Goldenberg. I work with the STOP organization, Southside Together Organizing for Power. I'm just supposed to set up what a CBA is, just so we can all kind of be on the same page. So community benefits agreements usually share four main points. So they're legally binding agreements between a community and a developer. The community can enforce the agreement. They're usually about things like housing and jobs. and the community has to be part of the negotiating process, right? So there's a lot of things that are dressed up as CBAs, but if they don't have those 4 elements, we would say they're not necessarily CBAs. Something that there's a professor who wrote a lot about CBAs named Virginia Parks, who points out something I think is interesting about CBAs, which is that in some ways they're a neoliberal solution, and they're criticized because of that, right? And so, you know, the neoliberal idea of rich and powerful people wanting everything privatized and wanting the government to get out of the way, right? And wanting the private sector to do everything. You know, when it comes to providing mental health services, parks, prisons, right? That's kind of this neoliberal way, and it's a private way of addressing issues in society, right? So it's kind of interesting that CBAs are typically also a private way of handling things, right? Because it's a private agreement. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind because, you know, while we're fighting for CBAs, I think we do still want to challenge the logic behind that, right? That the private sector is always going to have the best solution to help people. But, you know, I think it's clear that these developments are moving forward regardless, right? And so CBAs are a solution to kind of help us to live to fight another day, right? And in some ways, strategically, a lot of people have made the decision to do that. It's also kind of important to know that not all CBAs are private agreements. Sometimes they do involve the government. And so there's some efforts at CBAs where there's a particular city law or ordinance passed that kind of codifies the agreement. And there's also been efforts to pass CBA laws that would apply to all developments, not just an individual development. So there was an effort in Detroit that this woman who recently won a congressional primary, she was a part of that fight. So there's a lot happening around this. And I think that a very important contributions that CBAs have made, whether they're private or public agreements, right, is the idea that development should benefit everyone in the city, especially low-income and working families. And I think, you know, Marcos mentioned that this is a pivotal time to be saying something about how we want development to happen in this city, right? And CBAs kind of help us to do that. So, you know, it's important that we analyze, reflect what we're pushing for, ask if it's enough, and if it's going to take us to where we want to go, right? And so that's kind of what I'm excited about today. I think it's a space for us to do that, to reflect on what it is we've actually been pushing for, you know, ask ourselves if it's enough, and see how we can, you know, go a little further. So without further ado, I'll pass it back to Marcos to get into the panel.
Cool. Thanks, Alex. Great. So let's jump right in. I want to give the panelists a few minutes if they could, you all could introduce yourselves and also